This is our family photo of the four of us. And the joke was always that we were so poor that my dad used to use a bowl to cut our hair. So we all used to have the same haircut except for Jen. Jen always had ponytails, but the rest of us, unfortunately, had bowl haircuts. Just makes me sad because we were always so happy. We did everything together. Till the day she died, everybody was still friends and still together. We're all still together except for her. On the night of June 29th, my bedroom door was thrown open. My boyfriend and I were sleeping when the men came through the door with the flashlight and gun pointed at us. My daughter's crib was right there. They turned into the room. The gun was pointing at the crib. At which point I panicked. I was like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? I remember saying that. What are you doing? Why do you have that near my daughter? And he was like, get up, get out of bed. We want everybody downstairs right now. Like, holy heck, who's running through my house? You know, what is this? Nobody was allowed to talk. They made my whole entire family meet in the living room. And they had my dad at gunpoint. It was like a scene out of a horror movie. Like, you see this stuff on TV, but never do you live it. And we lived it. I didn't know if it was a robbery. No clues. They did identify themselves as Bethlehem police officers, but when you're awoken like that, till you start understanding everything that was going on, you didn't know too much. There was, I think, 3 detectives were there. Many uniformed cops were there. And they had my house surrounded. They just told us something had happened and Jen was involved and they needed to gather information. So we sat in the living room for a long time, just asking questions like, you know, who were you with tonight? You know, what car did you drive? My mother was at work. The only one who was missing that night was my sister. It was horrible.
June 29th, well, it was a regular day for me. I got up and I went to work. I worked at the Bethlehem Steel, and then I had a part-time job tending bar. When I got home after bartending, it was late at night, probably around 2 o'clock. I didn't see my wife's car, so I figured she went to work. I was assuming that all my children were home when I got home. I wound up falling asleep on the sofa. I was woken up with a 45 at my head. There was 3 cops with their guns drawn, pointed at me. Then the one went up through the house, got up the kids. They all came down. My wife's not there, or my daughter, Jennifer, and I said, there's something going on. What's going on? I said, well, my wife's supposed to be working. I don't know where my daughter's at, because I got home at late, and I'm assuming she was in bed. It's a weird feeling. You're frantic. We asked where Jennifer's at, and then they finally come and told us that she was killed up at the lookout, but they didn't say how or why. I was very confused. There's a panic in all of us. We were kind of like dumbstruck, really.
June 29th, 1995, I remember that my wife and I were sleeping and my phone went off and I was notified that we had a homicide up at the Lehigh Lookout. The Lookout is a very scenic area that overlooks the city of Bethlehem. It can be a draw for young people, teenagers, to just sort of hang out. It's secluded. When I pulled into the Lookout, the police were already starting processing at the crime scene. My first step was to stop to talk with the coroner. He was able to tell me that there were two victims. The first was a young girl who was laying face down on the other side of the wall where you might sit to look out over the city of Bethlehem. She had a gunshot wound in the back. There were some fast food stuff on the wall which suggested that she probably was sitting there at the time she was shot. I walked down the hill a little bit. It wasn't very far where the sports car was parked. In the back seat was another body of a young girl. And the theory was, based on the blood droppings and also where the gun casings were left, that it appears she probably ran from the initial point bleeding and then probably tried to get in the car to get away, perhaps, or to protect herself, lock the doors, and then probably died in there because of gunshot wounds. This is a photograph of Mary and Jennifer. I haven't seen this photograph for a long time, and it's very sad. I remember looking at the autopsies of these two girls. I mean, they were just so young, you know, and seeing them on a slab with bullet wounds, it's really tough to take. I don't think that there was any working theory at that time, but when I see people shot in the back, essentially, that means they were ambushed. The ballistics showed us that there was only one firearm for both victims, which suggests one shooter. Homicides are personal. They usually have some kind of motive. And we were concerned that here we were in an isolated area with two girls who were young, 17 and 15. And we're thinking, is there somebody in these forests, in the area, you know, with a rifle, with a gun? We really did not know. And we were very concerned about the possibility that we had a killer that was out there just randomly shooting people.
This was Christmas a few years ago with my husband, Carl, myself, and my 4 children. Back in '95, things were pretty good. Everybody was healthy and happy. I worked with children with disabilities. I'd spend the night with them, get them up in the morning, dress them, give them breakfast, and make sure they got off to school. I think it was 5:30. I heard a knock at the door. I was thinking, who's knocking at the door at 5:30 in the morning? I just remember my heart beating very loudly. And I went to answer the door. And when I opened it, my husband and my coworker were standing there. I could see they had been crying. I don't know why. I said, just don't tell me something happened to my Jennifer. And that always bothered me because I would have been just as concerned if it was Melanie or my boys. They kept shaking their heads. They wouldn't say. I thought maybe a car accident. And I said, all right, Carl, let me get my purse and we'll go to the hospital. And Carl just looked me right in the eye and he said, no. He said, somebody murdered our daughter. No, somebody murdered our baby. My friend told me, she said, you could have heard you in the next county. You kept screaming and screaming and screaming, murdered, murdered. We went to police headquarters and we walked in there. You could have heard a pin drop. There must have been 5 or 6 officers at their desks. Nobody was saying a word. I kept saying, well, what happened? What happened? Nobody would answer us. We were fingerprinted. They told us to sit down. Still, I didn't know what happened. Carl didn't know what happened. It was a very hectic day. I didn't see Jennifer except when she came home from work and we bumped into each other and she asked, "What's for supper?" Well, there was no supper that day, so this is why I said to her, "I'm just going to have to give you some money and you'll have to pick up some fast food or something to eat tonight." And I said, "You may use my car." Right away, her face lit up. We were just getting into the car to go when Jennifer looked out and she said, "Mary," she said, "do you want to go with me and go get something to eat?" Mary was our neighbor. She lived across the street. Jennifer's like, "Come on, I have my mom's car." And that's how she ended up going in the car. They drove me to work and they dropped me off. Jen came in the house with me. I said, "I'm going to give you $10, get something to eat." And I gave her all the rules and regulations about the car, the curfew. She goes, "Mommy," and she just put her arms around my neck and she said, "I want to tell you, I love you. I love you, Mommy." I said, "I love you too, but Jennifer, I'm not giving you any more money." And go. I have to go back to work. And that's the last time I saw her. Within an hour, the incident happened and they were dead. I was sitting there waiting. I kept thinking, oh my God, I gave her the car. She was in a car accident. They're young, they're girls. Were they raped? And an officer came out. He knew us. He said, "I know these people. They're my neighbors." He said, "Those were good girls. These are good people. I'm going to tell you what happened to the girls." He said they were both shot and killed. Everything just went blank, and I was like a zombie. It never crossed my mind that they were shot. They didn't elaborate on much. They told us we could go home and they would get in touch with us.
After we left the police station, we still didn't really know what happened. You call the police station every day and you get basically the same answer. "We can't give out any information because the case is pending." I read the newspaper. It told us that there was a murder-suicide, and they were saying Jennifer shot Mary and then killed herself. And it really upset me knowing my daughter, no, that ain't her. And it really pissed me off, per se, that they wrote something like that. I was enraged. I was a mess. I just can't describe what goes through your mind. To me, the news media sucks because they were trying to pick the worst out of my daughter. No matter where you went, the media, they were there, the people knocking at your doors. You can hear so much about your daughter, and then finally it gets to the point where you want to pop somebody. This is when I finally went out to greet all the reporters that were standing around the house, looking for answers. Well, they were outside, they were calling, they were knocking on the door, asking for interviews and stuff. And I just finally said to my wife, I guess it's time somebody's got to go out. So I guess I'm the one. So I went out and approached them. Well, to me, it was, first of all, it's like an overwhelming thing to have all these people here. But it's frustrating because Joe here's asking a question, and this guy's answering a question, and other guy's asking a question. They have microphones, and so they can hear you. They're shoving it in your face and stuff, and it wasn't the best of times talking to them. But I had to do it. They said Jennifer owed a lot of money to people for drugs, and really, that upset me. Because she wasn't into drugs like they said she was. They even come up with she owed somebody $500 or something. And I said, no, I don't believe so. And I showed her that she had more money in her bank account than I did. So I knew it wasn't drugs. She's dead, but why? They wanted to know. And I said, we don't know. I said, that was it. I couldn't do no more. And I went back inside.
Was it somebody didn't like her? Was it meant for me? I asked myself that in the beginning many times because we look so much alike. Was it meant for me? The cops made me to believe that I should just be extra careful because they didn't know. They didn't know if they were coming after the family. I was followed by a police officer. They sat outside of our house. They followed me to work. I looked over my shoulder. The cops questioned my friends. They questioned my neighbors. They questioned everybody. You started blaming your family members. You started blaming cousins. You started blaming your friends. My mom started blaming my dad. My dad would blame my mom. I didn't know if my dad did it. I didn't know if my mom did it. It was horrible. You see this on TV. You don't see this in a little town of Bethlehem.
There were lots of rumors going around that this was a killing because one of the girls owed drug money. We never really established any of that. They were pretty much average high school kids. We did a lot of background work on both of them. We came up with nothing to suggest that they were involved in anything other than normal teenage activities. These are two young kids, 15, 17 years old, minding their own business, sitting on a wall, enjoying a summer evening, eating French fries and drinking a soda. And someone shoots these girls from behind, and no one can say why. We really did not know, and we were very concerned about the possibility that we had a killer that was out there just randomly shooting people. Do we have a serial killer? Do we have random shootings? There was a lot of fear in the area. My office got flooded with phone calls, so did Bethlehem Police. We normally try to put the community at ease by saying, there's no need to fear, but in this case, we couldn't say that.
When it came time to burying my sister, my mom just wasn't up to it. She wasn't up to picking out her outfit. She just wasn't up to, she went away on us. Mentally, she was gone. So I remember picking out her outfit. My sister was like a tomboy. And, everybody normally, you bury him in a dress, you bury him like that. And I'm not going to bury my sister in something she wasn't going to be comfortable. Because I knew she'd probably come back and haunt me if I buried her in a dress. I dressed her in her favorite outfit that she wore quite often. She had on her favorite pair of jeans and her vest that she wore. And we did her hair the way she always had it done. Sucked. I didn't want to pick out. I wanted to pick out her graduation outfit. I didn't want to pick out an outfit she was going to be buried in.
The grief, it took over me. I was more worried about myself, grieving, not worrying about my children at all, or my wife. I go up in my room and I just stay in there for a while, or I go up to Jennifer's room and sit there and ask her why. No parent should have to bury their child at all. We checked in with the police every day for a couple of weeks to find out what's going on. Every day we got the same answer. They still haven't found a killer yet. And then you say, well, when is this going to happen? It's just a waiting game.
I couldn't get any peace. I had no peace of mind. I just wanted to know who did this. I did get the courage to go up to where it happened. That was hard. It was emotional. I kept visualizing what happened. There was a little car there, and two young men were there. And I said, did you know the girls? And they said, yes, they did. And I didn't recognize them. I didn't know them. I said, I was Jennifer's mother. I said, it's terrible what happened here. And then they said, yes, it was, and we're sorry. They got in the car and left. I didn't know who they were at the time. I just thought they were just passerbys.
Is it possible the girls knew their killer? I thought so. And the reason why I thought so is because generally, I go with statistics. Most time people do know. It's very rare that you have random shootings. So the odds were that this was in the circle of friendships of these girls. It was someone that they knew. That's what we thought. The very first starting point is family and friends. We started to trace the friendships of these girls. It took a lot of interviews. It was not easy, and it took the police months. There was a lot of people who felt that he was the guy we should be looking at. And he was one of the first people that we interviewed. He was not overly helpful. Not that he was necessarily lying, although we believe that there may have been some of that going on too. Very early in the investigation, he got in contact with a public defender who basically stonewalled the police in terms of trying to give any information. He sort of made himself look more guilty by doing that. Boyfriends do kill their girlfriends. But at that point, we had no evidence that he did anything wrong. It was just weird that he would, go to a public defender at that point. He wasn't charged with anything. He wasn't really being accused of anything. His name surfaced early as someone that was in the circle, but there wasn't any obvious connection between him and these two girls. So we came back to him again. He was 18, bouncing around pretty much on his own, staying at friends' houses, not working, didn't have a great relationship with his family. I called him sort of a drifter. He had had some crimes of theft and things of that nature in his background as a juvenile. So, we just really have a lot of information on him at that point. When they brought him in, he denied being at the lookout, never was up that area, gave some alibi that he was with two other young boys. We didn't have anything on him. We had to sort of put him off to the side and continue with the investigation. When you have an unsolved homicide like this, two young girls shot, and no one can explain why, there's no obvious evidence of motive in an area such as this lookout, which is a secluded area, it puts a lot of pressure on the police and the prosecutor to try to solve it. We were working day and night to try to solve this case. It was a top priority. We have team meetings just about every single day. I would be down either in the morning, sometimes in the morning and the afternoon for updates. Who'd you talk to? What do you think? Where's it leading to? And that's the way it went on for the summer. In early December of 1995, police investigators tell me that Mary's boyfriend wanted to reach out, that he had some additional information to share with the police. The boyfriend of Mary, Orlando, now is telling us that the victims were going to go meet Christopher Bissey that evening. This is important information because it puts Bissy, who's now, a suspect that we're looking at, in the presence of the victims.
So this is the outfit my sister was killed in. Somebody asked me the other day why my daughter, Mommy, why are you holding on to that? I don't know. And I look at the tiniest hole, and how such a little hole can just destroy somebody and kill them. 27 years. And I dream about it, and I have nightmares about it. Like it happened yesterday.
The name of Christopher Bissy kept coming into our view. No one seemed to know who he was in relationship with Jennifer Grider and Mary Orlando. He was not a friend of theirs. It's not clear how the girls knew Bissy, but it's the only evidence we have. So we brought in a number of his other friends, so-called friends, who said, when the news hit about the girls, Bissy was bragging like I was up there. I was the one who did that. A lot of these friends dismissed it as just bravado, and he was acting cool and acting tough, and they hadn't come forward right away. They're young kids, afraid for whatever reasons. They're going to get in trouble themselves, hanging around with the wrong crowd. One of them was the driver of the vehicle that Bissy was in, driving around with that evening. I think he was 18 at the time. And then we had another young boy who I believe was a little younger, maybe 15 or 16, who was a passenger. One of them, he had parents that I recall encouraged him to tell the truth. We interviewed the driver and passenger separately, and they gave almost identical statements as to what happened. The driver tells us that he's with himself, the passenger, Chris Bissy, driving around. At some point between 9 and 9:30, allegedly, Bissy tells him, I want to go up to that lookout. He pulls in, he opens his window, he's looking around, and all of a sudden, he hears gunshots. And he sees Bissy with his arm out the rear passenger side window, shooting at a girl that was sitting on the wall, and that he expressed as being in shock, basically, that like he was in shock. Then Bissy gets out of the vehicle and walks towards the girl who was fleeing and shoots some more. He gets back in and tells the driver, let's go, we gotta go. According to the driver and the passenger, they then drive around a little bit more, and that they don't even discuss what happened. There's like silence about this, which is incredible. And then the driver goes home. And basically, as he puts it, tries to put this out of his mind. When they described how the shooting occurred, it matched where we found the casings, where the victims were. So they had to be there because no one else would know what it looked like except people who were there that night. I could have charged all three with murder, but mere presence at the scene is not sufficient to make you guilty of a crime. Without them, I would have no case against the actual shooter. The boy who drove the car and the passenger, they didn't have the gun in their hand. I want to get the shooter, the person who pulled the trigger that ended the lives of these two young girls. That's who I want. Chris Bissy, he's the guy who pulled the trigger. I felt strongly that we had enough to charge, and so we made the decision to charge Bissy in early December.
It was in the middle of the night, around 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was the head detective. And he said, Joan, I just want to tell you we made an arrest. I was like stunned. And I remember saying, oh my God, who was it? I thought it was going to be somebody I knew. I was holding my breath because I was scared to hear who it was going to be. And he said it was a Chris Bissy. I said, I don't know who that is. I don't know where he came from. He didn't date Jennifer. He didn't date Mary. He didn't hang around with them. The detective said, I just want to tell you, it's out in the media. I'll guarantee you, in no time, they're going to be there. And they're going to be all over your house. They're going to be coming. He said, I would advise, why don't you go somewhere? So we did. I got the kids, I got everybody up, and we got dressed. When I came out, they were everywhere. There were, people with cameras and reporters with the microphones in my face. And did you know the person? Asking me 100 questions. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I had the baby in my arm and I fell. I tripped and I fell. I was a mess. I was like, let me out of here. Let me get in my car. And I just locked the doors and I left. Still, I didn't know what happened. Who was this Chris Bissy? Why would you shoot my daughter? My goal was to try to find out why he did it.
It's a picture of Chris Bissy after he was arrested. He looked like an average Joe. He looked young and innocent, but I guess he wasn't. I got to know what he looked like. I got to know what hate means. As far as I'm concerned, I could put a bullet in and shoot him myself. It's a picture of a killer. Nothing more, nothing less. A no good piece.
The first time I ever saw Chris Bissy was in the courtroom the day of the trial. I always said if you lined up 50 people, 50 suspects, he'd probably be the last one I would have picked. Because he looked bewildered, he was young, baby face. He didn't have that hardcore look that you would expect. As witnesses, they walked out and I thought, why do I know them? And then it clicked. Those were the two that were up at the lookout that day. It was actually the driver and the passenger is who it turned out to be. And that's creepy to think that I was standing there talking to them all that time. It was them.
These boys did not want to be cooperative. They were actually afraid of Bissy themselves. They didn't really want to testify, and we had to really, work on them and tell them how important it was. And one day there'll be citizens who will be able to look back and say, I helped the police solve a murder. The witnesses described that he started shooting from the vehicle and then got out of his car, walked down and shot again the girl when she was trying to flee. Matched perfectly the ballistics. I would have no case without these eyewitnesses. I needed them. When I have to convince a jury, all 12 beyond a reasonable doubt, I'd like to give them a reason, say, here's why he killed this person. But we don't have them all the time. In my closing argument to the jury, I said, I can't tell you why. I can only tell you what happened. Mr. and Mrs. Grider live with this daily and the pain of it. And there's still unanswered questions for them. They want a reason. Yeah, they want to know why. Then it's up to the jury, 12 people. We don't know what they're going to do, and they all have to agree. It's not an easy burden beyond a reasonable doubt, and all 12 people have to come to the same verdict. It was one of the hardest cases I've tried.
The day of the verdict, I remember them saying, you know, Christopher Bissey, we find you guilty of first-degree murder. And I remember sitting there like, thinking my sister should come back now. Like, I remember looking to the side like, where are you? Why aren't you back here with us? Like, this is all done. This joke is over with. Why aren't you here with us? And it didn't change anything. At the time, I wanted the death penalty. Like, he needs to fry. Let him die. But now, years later, I'm a mother. And I have 5 daughters. And people make mistakes. And you don't know if one of your children are going to make a mistake. So I'm very torn. Now I'm very torn. Who am I? I'm no better to have him killed. I'm no better. You know, we'll let God deal with it. He destroyed my parents. Because I do everything to make my parents' life perfect. And I can't make it perfect because I can't bring her back. So this picture was of my sister. She took the babies to the Philadelphia Zoo. So this was probably 3 weeks before she passed away. It just hurts me that she's not here with them because she would be spoiling them like crazy. And every little girl needs an aunt, and she doesn't have that. She would be that aunt that every time I would yell at my kids would run over to her house and hang out with her and be with her. She was always a jokester. Everybody always wanted to be around her. She would have been the fun aunt. I would have been the mean mom and she was the fun aunt. This is the last known photo that I have of her. Chris Bissey took so much from us. He doesn't realize how much he took from us. And to this day, I still want answers. I just wish he would tell us why. You know, so my parents can have some kind of closure.
I went to see Chris Bissey. A lot of people did not think I should go. I did not go there to forgive him. I did not go there to excuse him. Just thinking that maybe something that he would say that I would pick up on. I walked in first and I sat there, then they brought him down. And I started crying. I don't know why, I think I was so nervous. I started crying and I just said, you have no idea what you've done to my life. I said, especially my husband. I sat there for 7 hours with Chris Bissey. He never once said he was sorry. He never showed any, feeling bad for me or he just didn't care. And everything was denial. He didn't know the girls. He had no idea what happened. He just lied. He just told so many lies. He said, well, first of all, I want to tell you something. I never knew any girls from Bethlehem. He said, I don't know anybody from Bethlehem. Lie. And then he got up and left the room, and I left the room, and that was the end of it. For 26 years, I've lived without knowing why. Unfortunately, I have lung cancer, and I'm facing a life-threatening operation. When all this happened, these were young kids. Well, I think there was a lot of teenagers that might have known what happened or what it was about. Now they're adults. Maybe they talk about it now. But doing this interview, maybe we'll get an answer out of it. Maybe somebody would say, after all these years, my conscience bothers me. I do want to tell you, or I do remember something. And if things would work out for me, then I'll have some answers.
He's still alive, where my daughter isn't. They talk about how they have such bad prison, the cells are bad and stuff. I don't care. I mean, they did a crime. They got to do the time. And like I say, their cells might be 8 by 10s, but my coffin, my daughter's in, is only 6 by 3, So there's no room for her. But he's still kicking, so. I come here once a week, usually Saturday mornings. Well, it's his Holy Savior Cemetery. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's special because my daughter's here. It's just someone I can talk to without being ridiculed, you know, like someone, oh, you can't say that or you shouldn't, you know. She just listens. Looks good. Imagine a relationship if she was still alive. It's kind of hard because I think about that all the time. What would you be doing now, you know? Or how many kids would you have? How many grandkids would I have? You know, stuff like that. I think about it all the time. It's always okay to cry around her. And I do sometimes. Sometimes I smile, sometimes I cry. But I'm there.
My home was a home full of joy, love, acceptance. It was your absolute safe place. Of course, there's my dad. He was just a wonderful man, salt of the earth.
They said a woman on average speaks 28,000 words a day.
28,000 words a day.
An average. A man speaks 12.
My mom, Sylvia, went to college after she had me, and very intelligent, very smart, just beautiful, there was nothing she did not know. And just her walking in a room could make you smile.
And it's so much fun. And tomorrow we're gonna have more fun.
And my grandparents ended up living in my mom's and dad's house because they both were older. And my grandma had late-stage Alzheimer's, and my granddad, he wasn't in good health anymore. And then there's my little brother, Travis. He's 5 years younger. He lived right next door to us.
I had a really, really good time today. It was a lot of fun.
We were very happy. But I lost everything. Whatever normal I knew, whatever innocence I had died. And I became this person that looks like me, sounds like me, but not really me.
It's a photograph of Sylvia Reeves and a photograph of James and Evelyn Mitchell. Looking at these photographs, you know, they were taken obviously when they were living and breathing. And then the last time I saw them, they were laying on the floor, deceased. But that shows you how fragile life is and how quickly it can be taken by someone evil. I received a phone call around 2:30 a.m., February 13th, 2007. These calls only come that time of night if it's pretty bad, usually. There had been a shooting at the Reeves residence. I did not know the full context of the seriousness of it. I did know that there was multiple gunshot victims and the suspect was on the loose. First thought was, you know, who is it? You know, what's happened? And your mind's racing. Once I arrived at the scene, there was a sheriff's vehicle sitting there, marked patrol unit. Lights were not on. I was informed that the deputy sheriff that was driving that vehicle had been injured during the shooting. The deputy sheriff was taken to the hospital. I was told that Travis Reeves had been shot, and 3 people were deceased inside the residence. And he did state to me that Randy Wathney was the shooter. I'd never heard of anything bad on Randy. No trouble with the law. So I think most of us were completely surprised. I had met Lisa Reeves earlier in my career. She knew some of the same people that my wife and I knew. I had met, actually, Randy Wathney at one time. You know, I'm just thinking, what happened? Why did this happen?
I met Randy Wathney in 1997. My friend and I went to a concert in Memphis, and I keep seeing this guy wearing a flight suit. And I kept telling my friend, he looks so familiar, that guy looks familiar. And at one point I went to get my friend and I a drink, and he was there. He was like, you kind of look familiar. I'm like, you kind of look familiar. And then we started talking backgrounds, and we realized, okay, yeah, we know each other. We went to church together when I was a kid and he was a kid. And I asked him, of course, why he was wearing a flight suit. And he said he was in the Air Reserve and coming off of doing his exercises that was in Fort Smith. We connected on our shared path, going to the same church. And I'm not going to lie, all women love a man in uniform. And he just seemed very charming and personable. He was kind. He was funny. He seemed like he had everything together. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but we started talking on the phone, and that was that. And then after about a year, it was Christmas 1998. It was the first Christmas that he had come over. And I noticed he brought a bag with him. He said, well, I thought I'd show y'all something a lot of people don't get to see. The gear that you wear when you're flying F-16s or F-18s. So he went and put the flight suit on, and he talked about being involved in the recovery of Black Hawk Down. So we were like, well, that's really cool. My parents thought he was smart, clean-cut, articulate. You want your child to marry someone who has a good job and a good future, and he appeared to be all those above. He said one time where my dad could hear, you're bigger than I am. You outweigh me at least by 30 pounds. That made my dad just so mad. It was the first time he'd ever really said anything like that. And so when he said it, it kind of caught me off guard. This wasn't an everyday occurrence. So in my mind, I was like, oh, well, he won't be like this forever. Because at the time I did love him. I thought that we were operating off a firm foundation. And so when he gets down on one knee crying, saying, will you marry me? You're like, oh, yeah, of course I'll marry you. We dated for 3 years before we were married and bought a house that wasn't too far, about 15 miles from where my parents lived. But I knew real quick, once you move in with somebody, that's when you begin to see the darkness that comes out in them. We lived together as, man and wife for all of 9 months. And it was 2 weeks after we were married. He just turns around and says, I'll never love you like I loved my first wife. And I'm like, first wife? Well, yeah, I've had 2 other wives. And plus, they were thin, you're not. And by the way, I have 3 kids. And I'm like, didn't you think maybe I should have known that prior to getting married? His attitude was very nonchalant, as if we're talking about what to put on the grocery list or how the weather's going to be the next few days. There was no emotionality in it. he didn't understand why I was upset about it. I don't really even cry. I'm just so taken aback. This is so wrong. There's no sense to this. What else is he lying about? And that's what led to me kind of playing secret private eye, trying to figure out how many lies this man had told me. This is my mama, Sylvia Reeves. I'm sorry. I just miss her so much. She was the kindest, most gracious, loving woman. And I'm sorry that I brought that man into her life to do this. He always had this briefcase he kept in his closet. And so he goes to work one day, and I just decided to get that briefcase out. And I got in it and started looking through, and I was just, wow. He was not a major in the Army. He was a sergeant in the Army. He never flew anything. He wasn't a pilot. I don't even know if he actually ever even saw combat. There was just pictures of this life I was unaware that he had. The amount of lies that he told was just, you couldn't keep up with them. And I did, after that, I did confront him. He got angry about it. He got defensive about it. He would basically say, what harm does a little lie? He was angry that I knew the truth. How am I going to trust somebody like that? I'm going to question everything he says to me. And that's when I moved out. I moved back home. For the first couple of years after I left, we tried to work things out. But then it became less and less. I wanted a divorce. He didn't want to give me a divorce. The night before my dad had his stroke, he and I were out on our porch talking. And he said, we've got to do something about Randy. He said, something is not right with him. He said, I don't trust him. He said, we've got to get you divorced. And then the next day, my dad has his stroke. In February 2006, we had my father's funeral, and Randy showed up. I told him, I said, please, for all of what's good, please sign the divorce papers. He said, I knew now that your daddy is gone, you still want to go through with this divorce. And I'm like, yes, as soon as possible. I spoke to him maybe twice in a span of a year, and both times he initiated it because, like most narcissists are, he's in control, you know, and his saying was, no fat girl's going to divorce me. That was his thing. And he was hell-bent for leather that that was not going to happen. I'm at home with my grandparents. My mom was at a church meeting. And she came home, I would say about 9 o'clock. I was in my room working. And she came into my room. And, you know, she says, oh, good night, I love you. And I looked at the clock and it said 12:47. And I hear something that sounds like somebody trying to get in a door. So I get up and I'm walking down the short hall to the back door of the house. And all of a sudden, here he comes busting through the window. When I saw his face, and an expression I've never seen before, he's got very blue eyes. They were black. It was like the blood just ran from me. I got a knot in my stomach, and for the first time in my life, I was scared to death. Then the next thing I know, he grabs my throat and he starts choking me and immediately pushes me down, and he's just pounding me with his fist. He's straddling me, just hitting me as hard as he can. I'm trying to fight back the best I can. And it just gets worse and worse, and to the point to where I'm like, he's fixing to kill me. I start yelling for my mom. And my mom finally appears at the door. And she's like, what are you doing? He starts cussing her. And she's like, Randy, this is demonic. And soon as she said that to him, he just raised his fist back and hit her. Well, when he hit her, I grabbed the very back of him and I pulled him off of her. And that's when he turned around and swung and hit me in the collarbone and knocked me probably 10 feet down the hall. When I hit the ground, my mom makes kind of a beeline for the kitchen. And he turns around to go after her. And that's when I see his hand go in his pocket. And my mom turns around at me and looks, and it's a look I'll never forget. It's almost like, get out of here. You don't need to be here. And, you know, I don't know if she saw his gun, but then he shoots her. And I see her go down. I just kind of left myself. I think my brain said, or God said, okay, she can't deal with this. So something else in me took over. I'm thinking, I've got to get to my grandparents' room, who are absolutely incapable of helping themselves. So I ran as fast as I could. I get to my grandparents' room. It's when I hear the second shot. Oh, these are my sweet grandparents, James and Evelyn Mitchell. He would walk around humming and singing, and, you know, he was a good guy. He was a character. She was the most positive woman. She always looked at me and she would say, love you more than anyone. They both were teenagers when they got married. They deserved a far better ending than what they got in life. They really did. I've got to make sure my grandparents are safe. I get in my grandparents' room and I close and lock the door. My grandpa's standing there, and my grandma is sitting up in the bed. And I turned to my grandpa and I said, he shot my mama. I think he shot my mama. And he said, oh no, he couldn't have done that. And then I hear him beating on the door. Pounding, pound, 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 pound. And suddenly it got real quiet. I decided to open the door, the crack, to look both ways. I looked down the long part and I'm like, okay, he must be gone out. I'm like, he's realized what he's done. He's left. And suddenly a voice told me, shut that door. If you go out that door, you're going to die. Close the door. So I shut the door and I lock it. And I look at my grandpa and I said, I've got to go get help. I said, I'm going to go next door and have Travis call 911. And I remember looking at him and I said, I'll be right back. I said, do not leave this room. And I hop out the window, still wearing my night clothes, no shoes, no socks. I run over, knock on my brother's back door. I'm, kind of frantic. Finally wake him up. And he's like, you get on the phone with 911. He gets his 380 and goes out his back patio door. But thankfully, my brother's 2 children are not there. They're with their mother. And then I get on the phone with 911. And I remember the dispatcher telling me, well, go out front and tell me, is his truck still at your house? And I'm like, yes, his truck is still here. Then I see something coming out the same window I came out. And I couldn't really tell because it's dark. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, no more than 20 feet away from me is Randy with the gun. And he's got it pointed to me, and I yell, Travis, here he is, here he is. And next thing I know, my brother and he are shooting back and forth. There's shots around me. Then I'm running. I start praying, the Lord's Prayer while I'm running and getting back into my brother's house. I'm in the house, on my knees at times vomiting, on my knees praying. And then I finally see my brother, his truck leaving out his backyard. Then I see his truck just drive off in a deep gully, and the taillights are just sticking straight up in the air. I mean, my brother was shot so many times, and he kept fighting. He kept fighting, and he tried to keep me safe. I'm thinking, is he dead? Then suddenly my phone rings and it's my brother. And he's like, Lisa, I've been shot. He said, at least 5 times I know of. A couple times in the head. He's like, something happens to me, you gotta take care of my kids. I said, I'll take care of your kids. I don't know if my brother's gonna live. I don't know if my brother's gonna die. Everybody around me so far has been shot. You look outside, you don't see police. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what's coming. You don't know what's on the other side of that door. And finally, somebody does come in the back door. And it's one of the Lee County deputies who does a sweep of the house. And he sweeps every room in the house. And I'm like, is he still out there? And he said they didn't know where Randy was at. You can't describe the absolute and utter terror that you're going through because it's nothing like you've ever experienced. It's nothing like you see on television. It's 1 million times worse.
This was the image that I saw when I entered the residence. Lying on the kitchen floor is Sylvia. She's lying in a pool of blood. And on top of her, across her body, is her father, Mr. James Mitchell. He was shot in the back of the head. Your first thought is, looks like he went over to check on her, then he was shot in the head. As we proceeded down the hallway to the bedroom, the elder, Miss Evelyn, was shot in the head. It appears that she had gotten up out of bed. Maybe she heard something. She fell on the floor where they shot her, beside the bed. A lot of times I prepare for the worst. Well, in this case, it was the worst. I had met Miss Sylvia Reeves at a family event for the first time, probably a year prior to her death. It's a sickening feeling, especially when it's someone you've met before. It's a little more disheartening, I guess. It doesn't take away from the other victims, the other homicides of work. It's just different. It's like, oh God, why did this happen to these people? It's senseless, cruel, that someone would do this to them. And at that point, we decide, we need more help. We have agents come over from Little Rock to assist us at the crime scene. They were sending officers by the suspect's parents' home to see if the vehicle was there. They were checking local truck stops along the interstate. He could be anywhere at this point. He was a danger to the public. I was afraid that Travis would not make it. It appeared he'd went through hell. He's lucky if he survives this. There's a need of urgency because you've got to get this guy before something else happens.
Hello?
Hi, Travis.
Hey, Lisa. Are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay.
I really wish I could have been there with you, but, I got reasons why I didn't, but it breaks my heart that you did that by yourself. But I know what kind of courage it took to talk about everything that happened. I just want you to know I was with you in spirit, and I've been thinking about you. I am so beyond words, just proud of you.
Well, I know, and thank you, honey. And I love you, and I will talk to you later.
I love you too.
All right.
Take care, baby.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Travis had a shattered femur. He had a hole in his left shoulder. He was shot in both arms. He was shot spine, neck, shoulder. And it just makes me want to hug him and take it all away from him. I would so wish I could take his pain and his grief. He's a hero. He's one that keeps fighting no matter what. And, I love him so much. I'd given my statement to an Arkansas State Police investigator. After my statement was done, he came over and sat down on the coffee table in front of me and, just told me they were all dead. I kept telling him I wanted to see my mama and I wanted to see, where's my grandparents. I wanted to go over there and at least see them, but they're like, no, you don't need to do that. This is a very active situation. I've got police around me. After he murdered my mom and my grandparents and shot my brother 10 times, I found out that an officer had pulled up and that Randy was loading an AK-47 and that he had shot at the deputy till the deputy left. And then Randy realizes, I guess, hey, the police are coming, and he loads his guns back in his vehicle and he takes off. I was worried that Randy was going to come and kill me. They were asking me, do I know where he might go? And I had no clue. They asked me, do you think he'll go commit suicide? I said, oh no, he's not that type of individual. So I really had no clue where he would go.
A manhunt is on in East Arkansas as authorities search for a suspect wanted for a triple murder.
46-year-old Gordon Randall Gwatney is said to be armed and dangerous.
We knew that the general public was in danger. He would stop at nothing to get away. Getting the information from Lisa was vital, so we know what we're dealing with, who we're dealing with, and where to proceed next. We get a little background, his vehicle information, description, what he was wearing, possible locations he may be going to. Randy was former military. He had been working for a company in Memphis as a security guard. There was a dozen shell casings from the rifle in the driveway of the Mitchell Reeves residence. and there was approximately 18 shell casings of the rifle in Travis Reeves' yard. My worst fear and anticipation was that he was going to get in a shootout with a law enforcement officer, and that officer was going to be outgunned. It's a 2-story home. So when you make entry, you don't know what you're going to be met with, especially at a staircase. When you go up a staircase, if he's in there, they could just shoot downward at you, like a sitting duck. We knew if he had that rifle, it would go through us like a hot knife through butter. We just cleared room by room, making sure there's no threat in each room. Once we cleared the whole house, downstairs, upstairs, and attic, we knew that he was not there. While at the house, we discovered various firearms, pistols, rifles, lots of ammunition of various calibers, body armor. The weapons that we found were not consistent with what he used at the crime scene, so we realized he was still armed with at least 2 different types of weapons. And it was discovered that he had lost his job. And a lot of people who even knew him had no clue that all this had happened to him. And so that was probably creating a financial hardship for him. And it sounds like his life was spiraling downhill. Well, at that point, the sheriff's department and the state police had already put a bolo, be on the lookout for him, with his vehicle description and tag number and his information. No one really knew where he was headed to. Once the bank opened, we put an alert on his ATM card, and I had to track his phone. But at least 3 hours have gone by, and it could be anywhere in those 3 hours. It's just a stroke of luck if someone sees him on the road or law enforcement sees him. And we absolutely needed to get him before he killed someone else or harmed someone else in any way.
It's one of the most horrific homicides to have ever happened near the small town of Palestine, Arkansas.
We don't know what Randy Gwathney was thinking. We don't know who is going after next, if anybody. Was he just trying to flee, hide out? Was he going to go to his own parents' house and do something to them? He was a step ahead of law enforcement. And at that point, we could do nothing else but wait as far as locating him. We didn't know how it would end. There was a strong chance that he would shoot it out with law enforcement before he was apprehended. And after 6 p.m., I received a call from our local sheriff, and he said that Gwathney had used his debit card at Laredo, Texas. And about 40 minutes later, a dispatcher from Laredo Police Department says, "Mr. Middleton, we have him." And my first fear was, was there a shootout? And I asked her that, and she says, "No, we have him in custody." After reading his rights to him, he basically stated he didn't want to make a statement without a lawyer present. The AK-47 was in his truck, 5 magazines, 4 of which I recall was loaded. His pistol was on him, and he had additional .40 caliber ammo inside the truck. I think a camo jacket and a map of Laredo and other road maps. I don't know if he went there with the intent to kill, but it sure looks like it.
When I found out he was arrested in Texas, it was a huge relief. It was an absolute load off of my shoulders. The devil in disguise right there. He's an absolute murderer. Because there was no remorse.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
Gwathney doesn't deny pulling the trigger,
but he says he doesn't remember the shooting spree.
I still love my wife, and I love the family. I don't think I'll ever be able to look them in the eye ever again.
From what I understand, his defense, according to his lawyer, it was a combination of PTSD that he had allegedly suffered while he was in the military and some medications a doctor had put him on. But I don't believe it. He knew full well what he did, and that was wrong. The amount of evil I saw that had happened in this house, I've never seen before. One could wonder, was he doing it to hurt Lisa by killing her mother and grandparents? Or was he doing it just out of pure rage and meanness and evil? We would like to know his motivation, why he really did what he did. We may never know that.
I've spent 15 years trying to figure out why on earth this man would have done what he done. I never did anything to him. Why didn't he just come in and kill me? Why couldn't he have murdered me, not them? But I think he wanted me to suffer. He wanted me to watch him kill everybody that I loved and what meant the most to me. That's exactly what he wanted. Oh goodness, one of the greatest days of my life. The divorce that was years in the making. We finally got a divorce. Thank you, Jesus. He's an evil man, and that was the last thing he could hold over me was his signature to these divorce papers. It was his last bit of control over me. And so he knew once he signed these divorce papers, it was done. So that's all I got to say about that. He had to really learn how to walk again. He had to go through rehabilitation for 9 months. He's also got these deep emotional scars that he didn't save his mama. He didn't save his elderly grandparents. You know, my brother thought he could do this show, but he couldn't because it's so much emotional to deal with. And by the grace of God is that boy alive. And I thank God every day that he was saved. And you know, this was just a horrible, horrible thing that never had to happen. The ripple effects of murder go out a long way.
I worked really hard at making sure that bad people didn't get to hurt good people. And it didn't work. I tried to put him away for as long as possible so he couldn't hurt somebody, and it didn't work. This guy shouldn't be out on the streets in our community. He should be locked up where he can't do harm to other human beings. Evil exists. He's one of them.
He said he had not seen Erica since that day. After we reviewed the body camera footage from the traffic stop, we know that he's lying to us about when he last saw her, but we don't know why he's lying to us. And that's a red flag. There's a reason why he's trying to distance himself from her. I just need to figure out why.
She said they found her body. And I lost it. And all I remember was my dad grabbing me. He was crying.
My mom turned and said, I know who did this. The cop, his eyes watered, looks at my mom dead in her eyes and says, we do too. Bowed his head down and walked away.
These two photographs are of Eric Pearson once he was in police custody. And that's how I remember him looking back in 1994 when I first saw him. There's some people that commit murders in a moment of anger, and then there are other types of murders. And his was just horrific. On January 22nd, 1994, Christina Whitaker was murdered. Her body was found behind an abandoned home in Davie, Florida, and she had been beaten beyond recognition in the face. In the Broward State Attorney's Office, the cases were randomly assigned by the state attorney, and this is one of the cases that were assigned to me. When I received the case and I started reviewing the file, what I learned was that in 1985, Eric Pearson was convicted of burglary and attempted murder of a female, where he sliced her hands and tried to slit her throat. He was sentenced to 18 years. Unfortunately, he only served 6 of those years, thus enabling him to be out and to commit the crimes against Christina Whitaker. Christina was 17 years old when she was murdered. That bothers me. Her parents cared very, very much about obtaining justice for the death of their daughter. So, on December 2nd of 1995, we had reached, after a lot of discussions with Christina's parents, a plea agreement that Eric Pearson would plead guilty for the murder of their daughter to second-degree murder. He would be sentenced to 40 years Florida State Prison as a violent, habitual felony offender. He got the maximum sentence he could have gotten in the state of Florida. I thought I had put him in prison for all the time that was necessary to make sure he never hurt anybody again. I never thought I'd be hearing his name again.
This was in the summer. One of the days we went to the pool. We took the kids and she wanted a picture. At this time, me and Erica were talking about how we want to buy a house. That was our goal. We were going to do it together. You know, things happened. Plans were changed. I was 7 years older than Erica. Erica was my baby sister. Erica would follow me everywhere, and I would take Erica everywhere with me. She was loud, funny, energetic. There was never a dull moment when she was around at all. I was always worried for Erica. Always. Everybody has mistakes, you know, nobody's perfect. But, you know, everybody chooses their road, and some take the right road and some don't. Some take a little U-turn and come back and fix it all up. My mom called and said she hadn't seen or spoken to Erica since the 24th of September. At that time, Erica was staying with my mom, and what I was told from my mother was that Erica left the house Friday to get a pack of cigarettes, and she hadn't returned. And Erica wasn't answering the phone. Erica didn't post anything on social media, and nobody could get a hold of her. The first thing that went through my mind was something happened. It didn't seem right. My mom first went down to Sunrise Police Station. They said there's nothing they could do. She's 33 years old, and she could be anywhere. She's an adult. She might be out with friends, and she just doesn't want to come home. My mom was losing it. My mom was saying, "This is my daughter. This is not your daughter. Maybe your daughter will do this, but not my daughter." And they did not want to listen.
When I first spoke to Erica's mom, I would say she was a 10 out of 10 as far as, in panic, worried about her daughter. I could tell that she was concerned and she was worried about her daughter. She had a good relationship with her daughter, and she knew it wasn't like Erica to be, gone for a while without reaching out to her. But me as an investigator, I have to take a step back. I can't allow myself to miss other factors and other evidence in the case that I don't want to miss. She's an adult. There's nothing necessarily suspicious. There's a million possibilities. She might have met somebody, romantically, and they could have ran away together. Based on her history, we knew that was also a possibility, that she went to go, went somewhere to use drugs or whatnot. We're checking hospitals. Maybe she got checked in as a patient. Sometimes people have accidents and they don't have ID on them, so they get entered as a John Doe in the hospital, and then maybe she was arrested under a John Doe. She didn't give her any information. But every day that we don't find that she's been either checked into a hospital or placed in a jail, it's starting to indicate that something actually happened to her.
I was living in Maine, and my mom called me and told me, "Erica's pregnant." I was like, "What?" And when I spoke to her, she was like, "Could you believe I'm pregnant?" And I was like, "No, but you're going to be a mom." She was like, "Yes, I can't wait." Ever since then, she was happy. She was at that point where she wanted to get better. Erica always wanted to recover and do everything for her daughter. That's what always motivated Erica, was her daughter. Over the years, Erica stayed clean, and she was doing good. I was very proud of her. When I first got to Florida, my dad would cry at night. And he would say, "I know my daughter's dead." I could feel it in my heart, he would say. And he would hit his chest. But my mom still had hope. My mom still believed she was going to walk through that door. We went out and put flyers all around. So as we're passing out flyers, we started getting screenshots of posts that were being made on Facebook saying, "It's me, Erica, leave me alone. I'm a grown woman. I don't have to come home. Just leave me alone. I'm fine." And the next one would be like, how many times do I have to tell you guys I'm a grown woman? Just leave me alone. Everybody else believed it was Erica. But if you knew Erica, you would know right away that's not her. That's somebody else writing this. We had a feeling it was one of Erica's friends from the neighborhood. He's somebody that's not right in the head. And he would come around. And my sister, she would be friends with anybody, you know? But it got to where, like, he was in love, obsessed with my sister. It was upsetting because the way we were feeling at that time, we still didn't know anything. And, you know, everybody's a suspect.
It's possible that it could have been somebody that had to do with the disappearance that's just trying to throw us off the track, delay us finding her or finding them. Using investigative means, we were able to make contact with Facebook, make contact with the internet provider, and we were able to determine that the post was made by one of Erica's childhood friends, who the mother said was mentally unstable. So it's important for us to speak to that person and figure out why they made this account. We immediately went to his residence. We spoke to him, and he was visibly concerned about the police presence in front of his house. And I explained to him why we were there. He apologized for making the fake Facebook account. He didn't give us a reason why he did it. He said that he was sorry and he was trying to find Erica himself because she had been at that house on the day that she disappeared. That was definitely suspicious, but he allowed us to search his house just to make sure she wasn't there. We went in there, we looked around, we didn't see anything suspicious. He said he had not seen Erica since that day. He did say that she was picked up by a person he described as a white guy in a truck. He had a roommate that we spoke to, and the roommate's story matched his story. So we were able to determine, you know, he was being truthful with us. I asked him to take the Facebook page down. He agreed and he took it down. At that point, we had nothing else to lead us to believe that he had anything to do with her disappearance.
My mom, from the beginning, she kept doing whatever she could, going on social media, calling the people she knew. At some point, my mom heard that Erica was with a Nick in a truck. My mom posted it on Facebook. If anybody knows of this Nick, to please let her know. And then one of Erica's friends showed up at my mom's house and advised my mom, stop posting that Erica was with Nick. That's not his name. And my mom tells Erica's friend, well, how do you know? And he says, well, I seen Erica at the gas station earlier on Friday. He said she got off the truck to go get cigarettes in the gas station, and I went up to her and I said hi. But when I went up to the truck, I seen a grimy man. He had this grimy look on him. He looked like a sick individual. It didn't seem right to him. So he wanted to get his name. Erica's friend decided to introduce himself to the driver. He says his name, and he says, "What's your name?" He turned and looked at him and said, "My name is Eric Pearson." Why?
When you look at Pearson's criminal history, one of the first things that comes to mind is this guy shouldn't be out on the streets in our community. He should be locked up where he can't do harm to other human beings. When I moved to Florida in '87, people were serving about 24% of whatever term they received. And so it wasn't just Pearson, it was all the prisoners in the state of Florida. The amount of time they would do was solely up to the Department of Corrections. They determined who gets out, when they get out, and what the basis for that release is. Christina's mother was so troubled that Pearson had gotten out and not served his full prison sentence that she wanted to do something to try to bring about a change, a positive change. She was successful, and as a result, in 1995, the constitutional amendment was passed in Florida where prisoners have to serve 85% of their time. Unfortunately, you can't apply a law that wasn't in effect at the time the crime was committed. So therefore, Eric Pearson wasn't subject to that law.
My sister, Erica, never mentioned Eric Pearson to me at all. Not once. When I Googled his name, first thing that came up was the Sun Sentinel. And I freaked. Eric Pearson had a violent criminal record, attempted murder and murder, real close by where my mom lives. The things that were going through my head were, how did she meet this man? I just didn't understand, like, where did he come from? So I got on social media and searched Eric Pearson on Facebook, and a page came out, and I screenshotted it and I sent it to my mom. My mom ends up going back to where Erica's friend was at, and he says, yes, that's him.
Erica's mom came to the police department. She had information that Erica was last seen with a person that was recently released from prison for murder. Almost a year had gone by since he was released. He was still on probation. I called his probation officer and let her know that he wasn't in any trouble, that I just wanted to speak with him because he was the last person that she was seen with. I was already parked in the parking lot of his complex before I called him. I called him and I said, hey, I just said, how you doing, Eric? My name's Detective Coronado. Do you have a little bit to speak to me about a missing persons case? Eric is missing. I would like for you to come down and speak to me. He's like, oh, you're down here? I'm like, yeah, just come down. First impression of Eric Pearson is he's very tall. He could be intimidating. He has prison-style tattoos, looks strong. He made it known that he didn't want any trouble with law enforcement. He basically told me that he had met her through Facebook while he was in prison, that they had hung out a couple times after his release from prison. On that day, he, went to go hang out with her, drove her to a gas station. I asked him if he was willing to ride with me. I would drive him around and see if we can find, just piece together the route that he took and any places of interest in this case. I told him he wasn't any trouble. Everything that he's doing is voluntary, and I would really appreciate him helping me with this. So he agreed. Once he gets into my car, he directs me to Erica's friend's house. He mentioned that before they went to the gas station, they were stopped by the police. They were pulled over because there was an issue with the tag on the truck. And then once we get to the gas station, he directs us to the pump that he parked. And he said, okay, this is where she got off. She said that she was going to go buy drugs. She walked off. After pumping gas, he said he didn't see her, and then kind of, drove around looking for her in the area, didn't find her, and then went home. And then after that, he never heard from her again. Very friendly. Hey, I really appreciate you helping me out. Said our goodbyes and went from there. At this point, after what Eric told me, I'm still hopeful that we can find Erica. So we went to the gas station and we spoke to the employees of the gas station who gave us access to the cameras, and we started to review video. We do have video of his truck at the pump, a female that's walking away that appears to match the description of Erica, and she walks out of camera view. We have the video of the truck leaving a couple minutes afterwards. So we're able to confirm that story. So when I got back into the office, I started, looking for body camera footage for the traffic stop, and I was able to find that.
How you doing? I'm from right this started. Start your neck and get your tag. Just try to correct temporary tag. Stop, man. Any weapons in the car? Oh, sure. How you guys doing? All right, sir. Can I smoke a cigarette? Absolutely. I'm sorry? 27. What's wrong with you? Oh, man. I was on Instagram with kids. I'm good. By the way, I didn't even see you. Normally when I see police, I slow down, but, whatever y'all come back. Okay. Don't worry about it. Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
So the traffic stop was just a normal traffic stop. They checked all his documents. She doesn't seem like she's in any danger. So the primary officer gives him a verbal warning, just tells him to fix the tag, and just lets him go on his way. When we spoke to Eric, he said that he was first stopped by the police and then went to the gas station. But using both the time on both videos, I can determine that he had switched it around. The body camera footage happens after the gas station. He was with her after the gas station. He's lying to us, and that's a red flag. There's a reason why he tried to tell me he last saw her at the gas station. I just need to figure out why.
Once I learned Eric Pearson's background, the criminal record he had, I knew he had something to do with it. It was a gut feeling. So we went out and we put flyers out everywhere. We started in Davie because that's where Eric Pearson lived at. We did the gas stations in Davie right close by Eric Pearson's house. And we did corner stores. We received a tip that Eric Pearson would go to a bar daily, and we went in there and put flyers all over the bar. About 20 minutes after we put the flyers at the bar, we received a phone call that Eric Pearson had walked in that bar. He seen my sister's pictures everywhere, and he looked at the people that were there and real loud said, because of that, the cops have been on me all day. Turned around, kicked the doors open, and walked out of that bar. And when I received that phone call, that was it. I knew. I did call the detectives and I let them know it was Eric Pearson, that he did something to my sister. We were told to stop putting flyers up. That's messing with their investigation. Stop putting the flyers out and stop doing this and stop doing that. But we were not. My mom was not gonna stop. Why don't you guys go and arrest who did this? My mind was set that he was the one that did something. And I told the cops, well, I hope you guys get him before I do.
During this investigation, the family made their own flyers and they were going to places on their own, which is understandable because they're hurting, they're trying to find their loved one. But in a way that kind of hinders our investigation because he can totally shut off with us if he thinks that we're looking into him in the same manner. So I had to walk a fine line with them to gain his cooperation. When he came to meet with me, he brought his girlfriend to the police department. So I basically told him that the traffic stop was after the gas station and he did not last see her at the gas station because he was within the car. So he starts to backpedal a little bit, says that he doesn't really remember. I'm not hitting him too hard or calling him a liar flat out. I'm trying to gain his cooperation to see if he can, tell me what happened. While me and him were having a conversation in the interview room, detectives approached her girlfriend and had a conversation with her. One of our female detectives struck, a good rapport with his girlfriend, and they exchanged numbers. At this point, he's not under arrest. He's free to go. So he leaves the interview room. Later on that evening, 11 o'clock, the girlfriend actually ended up calling the female detective and told her that she remembered things that were concerning or alarming. So where the girlfriend lived, it was a trailer that was backed up to a canal. She said that Pearson would go back there and would stare at the canal and would make references like, damn, that bitch stinks. She didn't know what he was referring to. She just thought that was odd. And then we ultimately decided to go out there with cadaver dogs to search that area. They were able to get a hit along the canal bank there. And when they looked, there was something that was covered by palm fronds and rocks, like in knee-deep water. So once they were able to remove that, they were able to see what appeared to be a body that was covered in a tarp and a bed sheet and was duct taped together. It was in a really advanced decomposition state for a body being in the water. At that point, she was unrecognizable. But we saw tattoos that matched the tattoos that she had, and the jewelry she was wearing was consistent with the jewelry that the mom told us that she had.
So, October 16th, I was at a point where I just needed to be like by myself. And I went in the room and I laid down, and I remember falling asleep praying. I fell asleep praying, asking God to just please bring her home. And it was like 2:40, maybe 2:45 in the morning. The door swung open and my mom just fell to the floor on her knees. She was yelling and yelling, and she said they hung her body. And I remember yelling, "What did you just say to me?" And she's like, "They just left here, Lynette. They found her body." I jumped off the bed and I ran out the front door. And I was yelling at them, "What did you tell my mother? What did you tell my mother?" And all I remember was my dad grabbing me. He was crying. My mom turned and said, "I know who did this." The cop, his eyes watered, looks at my mom dead in her eyes and says, "We do too." Bowed his head down and walked away.
There was no obvious signs of trauma that we can say, okay, this person has been shot or this person has been stabbed due to the advanced stages of decomposition. So even though she was wrapped up by somebody suspiciously, we don't have a cause of death or a manner of death at that time. So we needed to wait for the autopsy, and then we definitely needed to speak to Eric Pearson. I felt that he was very close to telling us what occurred. He was just obviously, scared of the repercussions and stuff like that. But I felt like he wanted to talk and he wanted to tell us his side of the story.
I get to my condo. I was sitting there, just idle talk, and then I listened to her, so I was smoking a cigarette. She's like, "What's up, Marcel?" I was like, "All right." So she went and started undressing.
He claims that they began having sex, the condom came off, and that she became enraged when she found out that the condom had come off and they continued to have sex. He was giving us half-truths, in my opinion.
And the bitch punched me. I'm like, "What?" Then she kicked me. Kicked me in the thigh. She kicked me with her leg. And I was like, "What?" Oh, she was trying to calm her down, but it exploded. And miraculously, she got a screwdriver in her hand. Now the situation to me escalates. I finally get her arm positioned between both arms, and I put the blade, the pointy end, the blade part of it, towards her eye. I get it down in there, and I get it in. Which eye? I want to say the left one went in first. When I hit the second one, it was like a sigh, in a sense you could say. And her movement slowed down.
Stabbing a woman on each eye once and then the neck, and then covering her body up with a tarp and putting her in the water, I would say that act is evil itself.
Let me ask you this, and it's important to clarify. But you had made a statement with regards to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a monster that could come out. Yes. Do you feel that monster came out during that fight with her? Yes. Okay.
When I read about Eric Pearson, it took the breath out of my lungs. It was like, no way. He's not supposed to be out. I can't believe this happened again. The last time I looked, I believe was in 2005, at his prison website database, and it seemed like he had a whole long time to go. And then out of the blue, I just happened to read the article about the young lady that was killed in Sunrise. I worked really hard at making sure that bad people didn't get to hurt good people. And it didn't work. That's what's frustrating. I tried to put him away for as long as possible so he couldn't hurt somebody, and it didn't work. So that hurts. That hurts me a lot. She'd be devastated if she were alive and knew that Eric Pearson had been released and killed another human being. What's haunting is that he was able to kill again. Eric Pearson is one of those people that should not be out walking around in our communities preying on innocent people. He should be locked up. That's where he belonged, and that's where he needs to be for the rest of his life. Evil exists. He's one of them.
I'm disgusted with the whole justice system. Disgusted. He killed that girl at 17 years old. She was a little girl. 17 years old. Because he was good in jail, so we're gonna let him out. No, that's BS. You have drug dealers in there, non-violent crimes, sitting in their jail 40, 50, 60 years. But this man had attempted murder, and you let him out. He's the monster. He belongs in hell. I don't wish this on anybody at all. This is the worst feeling ever. I feel like my whole heart was ripped out. I don't think I'll ever heal. I'll never be the same. Till the day I die, I'll live with a broken heart. That's all. Poor niece. She won't be able to be there for her graduations. Anything. They put her picture in front of her ashes. I have her own little spot in my house. Elka loved to drink coffee.